Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 321, and today's date is March 22nd, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief for this Saturday. And let's get right into the economic collapse news. And we all know that the European nations are in a recession/depression. I'd say leaning a little bit more towards a depression at this point. And there are countries out there like Greece, Cyprus, Spain, France, and there are a lot of people who are starting to get fed up with the government and their lies. And again, people cannot make ends meet at this point, so they are marching because they're pissed off. That's basically what's happening. And thousands of people in Spain right now are set to protest austerity they claim is destroying their country. Under the banner of No More Cuts, the protesters are calling for an end to Spanish government's empty promises. And again, these protesters are out there, and of course, the governments are always telling us how great everything is. We're in a recovery. We heard this from the president of France. We heard it from Spain. We hear it from Italy. We hear it from Greece. And again, you can just do this for so long until the people say, you know what? I think you're lying to us at this point. And some of the protesters in here, this is what they're saying. Why am I here? I am sick of this government with all the promises they never fulfill. They said they were going to create more jobs and lower the taxes, but it's a lie. Instead, unemployment rose from 4 to 6 million. This is the only way we can fight back. And this is coming from one of the protesters. And again, this goes on to say that hundreds of people are being evicted from their homes every day in Spain. And at the beginning of the month, the Spanish Minister of Employment said that Spain had finally pulled itself out of the recession and registered economic growth. And again, what are the people hearing? They're hearing propaganda. They're hearing lies, because you know when you are in a recovery. You feel it. People get jobs. Businesses open. You have more money. You exactly know what it feels like. You don't need the government to tell you that you're in a recovery over and over and over. That is a lie to make you think that they're doing something, but they aren't. They're making it worse. Now, Spain is not the only area that's seeing problems. I mean, we're in the UK, we understand that people are taking out payday loans to pay for their mortgages, to make ends meet. They're dipping into their savings. And right now, what they're seeing is they're seeing a huge amount of graduates in the UK, around 45%, who cannot pay back their student loans. And hey, we're seeing this here in the United States also. This is happening pretty much everywhere. Why? Because there are no jobs out there. And right now, in a dramatic reassessment of UK students' finance, the government estimates around 45% of graduates will be unable to pay their loans back. Labour's Shadow University minister told the BBC that the latest figures are evidence that the new system has made no difference to students whatsoever. So few students can afford to ever pay back their student loans. And again, what do they think is happening here? And of course, the government is out there, and they're saying that, you know, the unemployment's at 7.2%. It's standing at 7.2. But if you look at the youth unemployment, it's much larger at 19.8. And of course, these numbers are coming out of the government, and you can just imagine, just like everywhere else, it's probably a lot worse. Again, if you cannot find work and make the income, you will not be able to pay this type of debt back. And of course, all these governments realize this. They realize that all of this debt cannot be sustained. So what do? What does every single country do? They implement more taxes on the people. And what are we seeing right now? Well, IMF's property tax hike proposal is going to come true in the UK. And they always start with the wealthy, and then they work their way down. This is what happens. They say, okay, we're only going to tax the wealthy, and all the poor, the middle class, say, yay, it's not us. Let the wealthy should pay for it. But what happens is they do this in the beginning, and then it trickles down to the middle class, it trickles down to the poor, and this way everyone ends up paying. And right now what they're looking to do is they're going to levy some taxes on immovable property. They're going to tax people on homes, and they're looking to do this pretty much on the wealthy at this point. And this goes on to say that wealth taxes of various kinds target the same underlying base as capital income taxes, namely assets. They could thus be considered as a potential source of progressive taxation, especially where taxes on capital incomes are low or largely evaded. There are different types of wealth taxes, such as recurrent taxes on property or net wealth, transaction taxes, and inheritance and gift taxes. And we are seeing this in many different countries. I mean, France started to do this. They're taxing the wealthy at a very, very high tax rate. And then eventually what happens? It goes to the middle, and then it ends up with the poor. We see this in the United States. The wealthy are being taxed more right now, and this will trickle down to the rest of the people. Because, again, we have to think back in time when the government said they'll be imposing taxes, and they only imposed taxes on the wealthy. The rest of the country had no taxes, and then eventually what happened was, oh, well, now we have to do the middle class, now we have to do the poor. Basically, you know what? Everyone needs to be taxed at this point, and this is how they do it. It's very incremental. They take their time, and they do it, and it sneaks up on everyone, and no one realizes what is happening. Now, I talk about real estate quite a bit, and we all understand that it is completely imploding on itself. And what we're seeing right now is, let's take a look at the U.S. home ownership rate at this point. Now, from 1986 to about 1994, home ownership was around 63.8% or so. It stayed pretty steady. And then in 1994, all of a sudden, it shot up. And from 1994 all the way to 2008, it reached a level of around 69.5%. But since 2008, home ownership has been declining. Americans do not own homes. It went from 69.5%. We are now at 65% at the end of 2013, and it's continually heading down. Pretty soon, we're going to be at levels back to 1986. This is not good for the economy. Most of these homes are in foreclosure, they're empty, and again, we understand the hedge funds, the investment companies are now even trying to unload their properties because they realize this bubble is about to burst. Okay, now we understand that when this collapse happens, nobody's money is going to be safe in the banks, and we realize this. This is why they created all these bail-in documents. Well, the EU agrees on bail-ins, and this goes on to say that European Union politicians struck a deal on legislation to create a single agency to handle failing banks and bail-ins in the Eurozone. Negotiators persuaded nations that had been opposed to the proposed single resolution mechanism and the legislation for bail-ins to agree. Insolvent banks will be treated equally regardless of the country they are based in. Failed banks, creditors, both holders and depositors will be subject to bail-ins in the same way in every single country. It's a very good agreement, the European Central Bank President Mario Draghi said before the meeting of the EU leaders in Belgium capital. Of course it is a great agreement because they're going to be stealing your money. That's why it's great. And this continues on. It says it had already been agreed that shareholders and importantly now depositors will be bailed in before the single resolution can be tapped. About 100 bank plus transnationals and those already bailed out will come under the direct supervision of the ECB from January. Banks in the Eurozone remain extremely vulnerable. Of course, we all understand this, that these banks can fail at any second, and our research on bail-ins and the developing bail-in regimes clearly shows how banks remain very vulnerable, and it is now the case that in the event of bank failure, your deposits could be confiscated the same way it happened in Cyprus. So right now, we should be getting prepared for this. Don't, and this is my opinion, and this is what I do, I only keep a certain amount in the bank to pay my bills. The rest is not there, because I am not going to get caught while they implement these bail-ins and they implement a bank holiday and then capital controls. And even though they're going to tell you that it's only for a week or two, we know this is going to be completely false, because just take a look at Cyprus. It's been over a year, and now they're saying late spring they're going to remove the capital controls, and I'm going to bet you that they probably will not do this. Again, if everything collapses, it won't matter at all at that point. At that point. Now, here's some good news. The Idaho governor signs emergency legislation nullifying all future federal gun laws in Idaho. On Thursday, Idaho Governor Butch Otter signed a bill which would effectively nullify future federal gun laws by prohibiting state enforcement of any future federal relating to personal firearms, a firearm accessory, or ammunition. And again, the law goes on to say that protect Idaho law enforcement officers from being directed through federal executive orders, agencies, orders, statutes, laws, rules, or regulations enacted or promulgated on or after the effective date of this act to violate their oath of office and Idaho citizens' rights under Section 11, Article 1 of the Constitution of the State of Idaho. So right now, they are completely nullifying all of this. And again, we understand what the federal government is doing. They are trying to disarm the American people. This is their agenda. Their goal is to pass the UN Arms Treaty and the Dianne Feinstein bill so they can remove the weapons from every single person. And every state should be copying this, where these laws are completely nullified, because the Second Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, this is the law of the land. You cannot create a law that goes above this. The only way to do it is to add an amendment. And the only way to add an amendment is that every single a majority of the states have to agree and have some type of referendum where they agree to put this amendment in. The lawmakers cannot just say, oh, we have a law that's going to cancel this out. It is impossible. And they designed it like this on purpose. Okay, now there's a new drone in town, and this one could be hovering right over your home. And what it does, it allows hackers to get into the contents of your smartphone. It allows them to get into wireless devices, to cell phone devices, and steal usernames, passwords, financial information. And again, this type of system could be flying around wherever you live, stealing information. And again, all this is to spy on every single person out there, to find out your information, to listen in on your phone calls. And again, this is why the NSA is out there. This is why the DHS is out there with their fusion centers. And we discussed, a lot about spying. And again, this is just another tool in the arsenal for them. Now, Armenia is out there, and they are now backing Crimea's right to self-determination. They are part of Russia, and Armenia has backed Crimea's choice of joining Russia, supporting the right to self-determination for the peninsula's population. In response, Ukraine said, you know what? We want the ambassador of Armenia to be recalled here, and they're recalling the ambassador back to Ukraine. Now, several hundred demonstrators are now in Kharkov, and they're protesting because they want a referendum just like Crimea. This is the eastern section of Ukraine, which borders Russia, and they want to be part of Russia also. They're out there. Demonstrators are holding flags, and they're calling and chanting for referendum Russia, and we might see other parts of Ukraine join Russia, and we'll have to see how this goes. And again, the central bankers, the United States government, the EU, they're all sitting here watching this, and there's been no invasion. There's nothing happening. There are no troops invading Ukraine, telling these people you have to come over. They are doing it without violence. They are doing it by letting the people actually decide. And you have to remember, the government that is in Ukraine right now is not an elected government. This government was put into place by the central bankers, the United States government, and EU. They already had these people set up. They already knew they were putting these people in. They picked them out beforehand, and this is why they're not having elections right now, because if they had elections, they might not be in office, and they might not be able to loot the country. They might not be able to put them on the EU system. They're trying to have them join up with NATO, but that's not going too well. And again, there were no elections. But what we're seeing right now in the corporate media, they're telling us that, pro-Russian troops invaded the bases and they made people, and they captured the bases and they made people come over to their side. And what's happening is nothing like that whatsoever. Only 11% of Ukrainian soldiers opted to quit Crimea. Only about a ninth of Ukrainian military personnel currently doing service in Crimea have made a decision to leave the peninsula and go back to Ukraine. And as of March 21st, less than 2,000 out of the 18,000 soldiers of Ukrainian military forces who are currently stationed in the Republic of Crimea have wished to leave for Ukraine. So again, they see this happening where most of the people are staying with Russia, Crimea. There's a 2,000 or so going back to Ukraine, but what they're doing is they're losing their armed forces, and this is why they've been building the National Guard up. This is why they're trying to get anyone they possibly can, and they're actually losing the battle, and their backs are against the wall. They're putting these ridiculous sanctions on Russia that are only on individuals, not on the country, because they're afraid to do it on the country. And if they actually do it on Russia, I've discussed this many times, they might actually end up doing it just so they can blame them for the collapse. But we'll have to see how that goes. And this report went on to say that Russia's defense minister, Sergei, has ordered the Black Sea Navy to provide safe passage to Ukraine to those soldiers who made a decision to do so. So they're saying, listen, we'll help you with your families, we'll get you out of here, and you can go back to Ukraine if that is your choice. Okay, now we understand in Syria that they are now building up military force in Jordan, and they have soldiers there, they have military assets there, they have CENTCOM, which is an underground base where they have military officers all ready for this invasion into Syria. They've been building this up, it's been very quiet, and every so often they try to sneak soldiers through into Syria, and they could either be hit squads to take out Assad, or they could be setting up or trying to do something tactical before the invasion. But again, as troops crossed from Jordan into Syria, they were spotted, and the Syrian government came down hard on them, and they killed several of the fighters, and the fighters never made it to where their mission had them going. And again, we're seeing this because we understand what is happening. We understand they are losing, the central bankers, U.S. government are losing the war in Syria. I mean, Assad has been pushing the rebels back. He almost has the entire country at this point. Most of the chemical weapons are out of Syria, so the U.S. government really has nothing to say about this. The Geneva II talks failed because they only had one thing on the agenda, was to remove Assad, and ever since then, they've been building up the propaganda about cyber attacks from the SEA. They've been talking about the hidden biological chemical weapons, and we understand why all this is happening. We understand where this is going to lead us because, again, we saw this happen back in August, and they're not going to give up because their goal is the same. They need Iran on the central banking system. They need Syria on the central banking system. They need those leaders out of the country. They needed Ukraine, but they're not getting Ukraine. They're only getting a small portion of it, and there's more towns and cities that want to join Russia at this point. So the central bankers at this time are really losing the battle, and when they become desperate enough, you will see this event go forth, and we will end up into war. Now, will it happen the split second the event happens? No. It will take some time. They'll say they're negotiating. They'll make all of this propaganda up to make it look like they're trying to have peace right now. But they will continue with the propaganda, just like you see in Ukraine right now. They're continually sending out this propaganda that Russia's moving in, it's going to be war, Russia this, war, war, war. If you notice, all you hear is war from them, and we're getting ready for war, we're getting ready, and especially out of the Ukraine acting president and the prime minister, it's always the same. And again, we have to remember, Russia invited Ukraine in to drive through along Russia to see if there are troops there. They allowed the U.S., Germany, and other NATO countries to fly over in the Open Sky Treaty to see if they have troop buildup. But again, the central bankers, U.S. government, European nations, they do not want peace because they understand this huge collapse is coming, and we know it is because they continually put more and more taxes on the people. They're talking about bail-ins, and we know where all this is headed. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.